Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. George Neild, and I am pleased to have the opportunity to serve as the moderator for this special GNF session on spaceports, enabling the space economy. There is a lot going on in space these days, and Bryce Space and Technologies does an excellent job of keeping track of all the spending that is related to space. Last year, they put out a report on the global space economy, and they estimate that today it amounts to about $360 billion. And of that, less than 1/4, the amount shown in the upper left quadrant of this chart, is related to government budget spending. And all the rest is basically commercial, whether it's private individuals, companies, or other institutions. And the exciting thing is that the financial experts are predicting that this global space economy will continue to grow at a very rapid pace. UBS, which is a Swiss-based international financial services group, believes that in the next 10 years it could reach a level of $805 billion, and in 20 years up to $1 trillion. Morgan Stanley predicts that by 2040 it could amount to over $1 trillion. And Bank of America Merrill Lynch believes that by 2045 it could total $2.7 trillion. That is a huge amount. I believe that much of that economic activity could take place at or near spaceports. Now, traditionally, when we think about spaceports, we think about rocket launches and taking satellites into space. And that's certainly going to continue in the future. In the next 12 months or so, we're going to see at least 2 different companies starting their commercial operations for suborbital space tourism. But I'd like to offer the suggestion that we try to broaden the way we think about spaceports. Not just limit it to places where launches and reentries are conducted, but rather as places that can serve as focal points, technology hubs, to support a wide variety of different aerospace activities. Things like research and technology development, whether you're talking about launch vehicles, satellites, engines, avionics, software, and the like. Education and training, things like centrifuge testing, altitude chambers, parabolic aircraft flights, or even experience trying on and working in spacesuits. Point-to-point transportation is certainly a very important activity that we expect to see in the near future. Aerospace manufacturing, again, launch and reentry vehicles, satellites, components, final assembly and integration. Workforce development, you can see partnerships with schools, universities, various academic projects, training programs, co-ops and apprenticeships, and international partnerships, both between governments, between companies, between universities, and even spaceport to spaceport. We've got a great panel here today to talk to you about some of these things, with representatives from spaceports and space-related organizations from all around the world. Carly Scott is the CEO of Equatorial Launch Australia. Roberto Vittori is a former ESA astronaut and is currently the space attaché at the Italian Embassy here in Washington. Masami Anoda is director of the Japanese Exploration Association, JAXA, in Washington, D.C. Talal Al-Kissi is the advisor for strategic projects for the UAE Space Agency. And Dan Hicks is the CEO of Spaceport America in New Mexico. So with that as an introduction, why don't we start with Carly.
Thanks very much, George. It's great to be here with you. Have you had an incredible IAC event so far? I'm seeing a few nods, fantastic, because I have. And I mention it because the power of place to connect people is something undeniable. There's something just magnetic with getting humans together and physically connecting. And I think it's something we sometimes forget when we're talking about the space industry, but it's very relevant to talking about spaceports and that physical location. And I'm going to talk about the power of place, a spaceport, to be like a permanent event, a permanent IAC, constantly generating efficient connections between industry and individuals with far-reaching economic benefits. So let's have a look at the Animus Space Centre, which I'm the CEO of. Yes, thank you. So just in Australia there, we're at about 12 degrees from the equator. We have a deep water port, a city-quality airport, fibre optic cabling for telecommunications right to the site, about 62 hectares to develop, fit for purpose. It is a fantastic location right here in the top right-hand tip of the Northern Territory. It's almost Mars-like conditions when you get out to the red Earth out there. We'll grow from small vehicles to medium vehicles, and it's a location that's getting a lot of attention. Within the last 2 weeks alone, we've signed 2 new vehicle providers who want to launch from our site. We've got a priority access agreement with another. And I can announce today that we've had a fantastic milestone achieved where we have environmental approval to develop that site ready to go right now. Now, what that means to the international space community is that there's a site close to the equator in the stronghold trading nation of Australia that is ready to be built, fit for the exact purposes that you require. Now, this is a huge thing. But I'd like to ground this conversation for just a moment in the people that we talk to day to day. You're looking at a young child from East Arnhem Land, where our site's located, from the Yolngu clan group that we work very closely with. Now, we always talk about it takes 400,000 people to get one person to space. It's impossible to believe then that there isn't this flow-on impact that spaceports can be the hub of. How can a spaceport not aggregate economic activity when it takes 400,000 people for the one thing we think of most likely in getting one person to space? For us, this includes on-ground activities that are very practical, really practical jobs for people from the starting point, in low-carbon construction, for example, maintenance. And when we talk about recovery, we're engaging the traditional owners that you're seeing here in that recovery process. Drone training, how to go and pinpoint the recovery spot and recover in a manner that works for us as industry, that's safe and reliable, but is also culturally sensitive and responsive to the way that the local community want to care for their land. Now, this sort of upskilling and culturally sensitive practice has that economic and social impact demonstrated very clearly within it. And it's transformational to that local community. But it's also very beneficial for the customers that look to work with us. When you consider a lot of US contracts are now looking to see whether you're engaging traditional owners very well or First Nations people. We have that naturally, and it's a natural benefit for the customers that we talk to. And I talk about this because we're always talking about the aspirations of people through space. And they have practical applications to the people on the ground right through to all of our day-to-day jobs as well. We talk about space and space pursuits that should be friendly. And did you know the UN target for aid donation as a proportion of your country's gross national product? It's about 0.7% of that. The top 5 aid donating countries, out of those, 3 of those are in the top 5 of space budget allocation countries as well. So you could see that there's an alignment between policies of understanding that collaboration internationally, peaceful pursuits, and the peaceful pursuit of space has got some policy backing. So there's international recognition that launch and the launch from a spaceport can have flow-on impacts socially and economically. But there are problems as well. We have trade and investment and employment policies that can hinder the development from spaceports and space more broadly. So what do we do? This image here from the World Economic Forum is a really great map of some of the flow-on impacts that are generated through space and space development through spaceports and physical locations. Benefits to society, benefits to reducing conflict more broadly. And let's look at that in practice. There's a long history in Australia of being part of this collaborative approach. 50 years ago, when we were celebrating the Apollo landings, 50 years ago those images came through Australia. That's some of the past. Going forward into the future, our government's committed $150 million to work collaboratively with NASA to support the pursuits going forward. Now, I can announce today another thing that's really exciting for us. There's some international collaboration that's happening right now. We've signed an agreement with NASA as a world first to host suborbital launches from the Animus Space Centre. It is the first time that NASA will launch their rockets from a non-government site, and we're very proud of that announcement and very much looking forward to hosting that activity. It's a demonstration of that collaboration that's happening right now and is beneficial through a spaceport location. So it's a physical site, the Animus Space Centre in this case, that's providing these multifaceted benefits to the economy, science and communities. Could investment, banking and financial policies be built to form increasingly beneficial situations here on Earth and into space? I certainly think so. Could we see from the foundation of a spaceport the generation of a septenary industry, a seventh industry form, where the funding of development, assets, people, policy could drive unique collaborations further, more than what I've just announced right now, seeing future industry development both here and off Earth, all needing a physical connection point, a permanent party, a spaceport. I mentioned earlier 400,000 people for just that one into space. How could anyone consider that spaceports were anything less than multifaceted, powerful hubs for economic and social connection when you look at the structure that we build and the industry that we support more holistically? Thank you.
Thank you, Carly. And Roberta, if you want to go next, please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, George, for my presentation. No, that's wrong. It's not me. I didn't do an EVA. I did fly, but not the EVA. Oh, maybe my next mission. Yeah, that's it. I recognize it. Thank you, George, for having me here. The only point that I need, astronauts are never former. And you can call it senior, experienced, but not former.
Fair enough.
So, in fact, I want to fly again. Today, I would like to share with you my flying experience as a test pilot, as an astronaut, and why, when I met George, I saw in George a leader. I really enjoyed his vision. When we talk about spaceport, I want to differentiate between spaceports and launch sites. So I launched from the Kennedy Space Center. At the Kennedy Space Center, you have launch sites and you have a runway. There is a huge difference. Apologies if anyone gets offended if I want to emphasize the difference between aerospace and space. Are very different, totally different. Spaceport is aerospace. Launch sites are rockets, interplanetary transportation. I know that in the last 50 years, those two were confusing one with the other together, but space and aerospace are different. Spaceports and launch sites are different. Ideally, spaceports are on Earth, launch site on the moon. If I want to go to Mars, I depart from the moon, not from Earth. It doesn't make sense. In the future, this will be the configuration. Spaceports, nevertheless, are extremely important, are vital for the evolution of aircraft into spacecraft. So when I was waiting at the Kennedy Space Center to launch on the shuttle, the first landing opportunities was in Spain. That's the reason for which I don't consider important international collaboration when you talk about spaceport, because it's the global dimension of the business itself. So if I have a space plane, like the shuttle was, I lift off from the Kennedy Space Center, the first landing opportunity is on the other side. So it has to be an international effort to create procedures, standards, safety measures. And, oh, by the way, let's not forget that what we see on Earth is only the end of the story. When you launch and you go to space, by the way, I have 7 minutes, right? Simona, keep me honest. Raise hands in 1 minute to the end, all right? Wow, I got other 5 minutes?
Yes.
All right. So when you lift off on a rocket like the shuttle obviously was an hybrid. It was lifting off as a rocket, landing as a glider. So nevertheless, for the landing part, the shuttle was perfectly demonstrating the option, the potential, and the challenges of what is going to be for the future a real spaceport. See if I can handle the technology other than say that yeah. So talking about now Italy. Italy, in the last few years, made important progresses in trying to do what? To start focusing on the strategic importance of spaceports. So as we speak, as of today, we already have our first official spaceport. It's Grottaglie, okay? Now, in reality, spaceport can mean anything. Therefore, it's not necessarily true that you need to have one airport that can be upgraded to a spaceport and another cannot be. It all depends on the configuration, on what you want to fly. Currently, we are engaging in dialogues with the company that, as of today, is mostly involved in the aerospace, the way I was describing before, that is Virgin Galactic. So we have engaged in discussions, agreements with them, in order to see if there are converging interests between they as actors in the commercial space, in the US arena, and us. Geography and climate, there is no better place than Italy for hosting spaceports. This is a picture that I took myself from the International Space Station. You see my Soyuz parked underneath. And you may recognize Grottaglie from this picture as well. Now, what we have today is the so-called suborbital flight. Even suborbital is very inappropriate word, but let's use in the common sense. You take off, get to space that is beyond the 80 or 100 kilometers and land. Obviously, this is some type of a local event, but this is only a technology demonstrator. Point-to-point is the future. Without point-to-point, achieving only the 100 kilometers is not giving satisfaction to the incredible opportunities that, again, the spaceports will offer with the point-to-point. That the way I see it, there are two directions. One is transportation, and the other is access to low Earth orbit. So the spaceports will become in a complete charge of any satellites that you want to put in low Earth orbit. Rockets have a future, but well outside of low Earth orbit. That is the way the commercial space, the way I see it, will have the biggest opportunity, and I completely agree on the statement that a spaceport is not only a runway. A spaceport is a converging of technology, academic, research, medical. It is by itself a little piece of an entire section of our way we operate. This is a design that Francesco Santoro did it for me. When you re-entry, when you do a point-to-point, it's not easy. again, spaceport, you think about mostly the runway. In reality, that's wrong impression. If you want to slow down and re-entry from low Earth orbit, the maneuvering area, the maneuvering space that you need is huge. For example, flying 8 kilometers per second, if from 8 kilometers per second you want to land somewhere, you have to plan on the other side of the planet in order to land where you want. The shuttle was starting the maneuver from the other side of the world in order to land at the Kennedy Space Center. Now, in the future, that cannot be. That would be extremely illogical. So you need to create some cones. And those cones would permit, it would be like spiraling down to a landing. That is a challenge from aerothermodynamics, because those kind of maneuvers are extremely critical. There is something that the shuttle heritage did not disclose completely. That is stability and control of hypersonic vehicles in atmospheric re-entry. And the 1st of February 2003, Shuttle Columbia taught us a very hard lesson, that our perception that after 50 years or after 30 years of flying shuttle, we completely know how the planes, shuttle-like aircraft can fly in space, is understood, is totally wrong. There is a huge, huge part that is still an unknown, and spaceports are only the final element of the atmospheric re-entry. That is my last chart. Simone? Okay. My last chart, sharing with you my experience in one of my 3 spaceflight atmospheric re-entry. I was able here to take pictures. This was on the Soyuz, not on the shuttle. From left to right, or yeah, from your left to right. Blue sky is before engaging into the final part of the re-entry. Then you intercept the atmosphere and you slow down from about 8 kilometers per second to a speed that's low enough to open the parachute for the Soyuz, in the shuttle case, to land. And the braking action of the atmosphere is incredible. You perceive it as a pressure on your body. You perceive it as difficulties in controlling the vehicle. And that is what you would see in watching outside the window. You start from the blue sky, slowly become pinkish, yellowish, and then you see the flames. Now, on the ground, there will be the spaceport, there will be the people waiting for the landing. That transition is all but a given. So to talk about spaceports, first is a global effort for transportation of future generation, the point-to-point, and there are still a number of operational technical elements to be unfolded. Nevertheless, it's the biggest huge opportunity, and thank you again, George, for your vision, leadership, and your initiative today.
Thank you, Roberto. Next, Masami.
I always need to lower this a little bit. Hello, everybody, and thank you, George. My name is Masami Onoda. Oh, thank you for helping me. Oh, let's go. Good. Thank you so much. So my name is Masami Onoda. I am based here in Washington, D.C. I am, as you can see, Japanese. And I represent the Japanese Space Agency, JAXA. Today, though, bear with me because I'm going to also talk a little bit on behalf of the Japanese space community. And I think the vision that George showed us in this beginning, that was just great. And I talk with the Japanese industry a lot, and we do have talk about similar vision from time to time, and I think that's a vision and dream that we all share, that we might have a space sort of a center and activities, and even a space town or village, you might say, around a spaceport. So that's what we really hope that will happen in the near future, and I'm sure it will. So the Abe administration, as you can see, has been strongly supporting the development of space industry by promoting investment into space business in Japan. And as you know, Japan has not only a robust governmental space program, but also established as well as emerging space industry. And Japan's space industry vision 2030 sets forth to expand space industry from the current, it says 2.4 trillion Japanese yen, for those who have no idea what that is, approximately 12 billion US dollars to 24 billion US dollars in early 2030s is the vision that Japan has. Good, this is working. So for instance, in the emerging space private sector in Japan, several private companies looking at launch services. We have Interstellar, PD Aerospace, Spacewalker, Space One, many companies already emerging in Japan too. This is very exciting. There are also companies like Axel Space working on Earth observation constellation, Astroscale trying to tackle the problem of space debris, iSpace challenging moon exploration, Space BD, which is like a trading company for space, for instance, working with JAXA on ISS commercial use, Infostellar, that is innovating antenna sharing business, AL now having its second shooting star entertainment satellite ready. And forgive me if I left out any of the wonderful Japanese businesses that we have. I do support all of them. And Japan, JAXA has an office working on promoting space business development. Some of the staff there I see, so if you have questions later on, he'll answer them. And it is promoting a program called JSpark. Through this program, JAXA and private companies jointly conduct technological development and demonstration by bringing together their resources. For instance, an Avatar project with ANA Holdings, projects on space debris, small sats, suborbital business, AI, data applications, food business, and education business. So finally on spaceports, although officially being from a governmental space agency, my formal comments here would be that there is no official decision yet. That would be a little bit unexciting for this panel, so I want to personally give some food for thought for this panel. There is a group called Spaceport Japan Association recently established to promote Japan's aerospace and related industries by opening spaceports, a spaceport or spaceports in Japan. They are considering several candidates from north to mainland and southern islands of Japan. And the reasons that are advocated for this is that Japan is an island country surrounded by the ocean, and with its location, it can serve as a gateway to Asia, to space. And also, Japan has a strong aerospace industry, like I just explained, and so that it can support and further develop around such a spaceport and maybe create activities like George just envisioned for us. And further, JAXA supports the Japanese government in developing rules and regulations for this. And so we overall think there is an infinite role for commercial sector that the commercial sector can play in the future of global space activities, and JAXA hopes to work with the space industry to enable many of these innovative new technologies and businesses in the field of space. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Masami. Next, Talal.
All right, thank you, George. Here, I'll just put my 7-minute timer on here. There we go. All right, so in the UAE, as many of you know, we're fairly new entrants into the space domain. We've established our agency in 2014, and so we don't really have activities when it comes to the spaceport as of yet, but I'll get into how spaceports factor into our investment promotion plan that was recently announced about a month ago. Here we go. So first, overarching investment promotion plan that we've got is inclusive of how we would set a policy, strategy, and law that maximizes the incentives for companies to operate in the UAE and for investors to also come in and to inspire investor confidence. I think one of the main elements that we're considering is how we could leverage relationships that we have with the likes of Virgin Galactic through an investment position that we've got within that company, and with airports like the one in Al Ain that we signed an agreement with recently to see if we could utilize it as a spaceport as well. So I'll get into some of that too, but on a more broader scale, our laws, regulations, and policies are written in such a way that have the future in mind. So we want to make sure that it's something that's adaptable to the increasing evolvement of technologies and innovative approaches that companies are taking in the space domain. Some other incentives we have is, in the UAE, traditionally, companies that wanted to operate there don't have the ability to, own 100% of the company. They have to have a 51% share partner. So in the space domain, this is one of the sectors that was provided with an exemption to a certain extent, obviously in certain parameters, to allow for the incentive to attract companies to operate with space activities there. So many of you might not be familiar with the entities that are mentioned here, but all of them are relevant in the sense that we want to make sure that we leverage existing infrastructure. So for example, Nebraska over there on the top left is a special economic zone which is located right next to the Al Ain airport, which we're working with to see if we could utilize it as a spaceport. And the idea there would be that co-location would inspire companies that want to become a service provider or support that overall ecosystem in developing from taking the benefits of that shared services approach that the special economic zone has. Another notable one over here would be the Al Ain spaceport that I discussed. It's got several different entities around it, including universities and the new National Space Science and Technology Center. So we're hoping these things help spill over in terms of the positive impact that it would have on the space port operation down the line. As well, the other things on the investment promotion plan that we have are obviously different incentives that we try to use to attract companies to operate in the UAE. Some of those include how we would, there's an investment matching scheme with one of our entities in the UAE for venture capitalists that are trying to come in and do business in the UAE and access deal flow. There is a Starburst just recently opened an accelerator at one of our co-working spaces in the UAE, and they've got 2 out of their, I think, 12 companies in the cohort that are space-related companies, so that was really exciting for us. So this is our attempt to build out that ecosystem. When it comes to the spaceport specifically, like I mentioned, this is an airport in Al Ain that was fairly underutilized from a commercial standpoint, and that that was also being utilized for military training operations, but is co-located with a university over there and a National Science and Space and Technology Center. So that's going to act as an enabler, hopefully, to see if the economics of operating as a spaceport would make sense. And the fact that there is that investment with Virgin Galactic, it might be an interesting opportunity to see whether or not operations from there for both suborbital human spaceflight or science payloads, or both, could be a good opportunity from the UAE. And another notable company that has recently established an operation in the UAE is NanoRack. So there might also be a way we could look at microgravity research opportunities in the UAE that NanoRack brings to the table and combines with Virgin Galactic on, so that we could stimulate that type of activity with universities in the region. One last thing I'll mention is we recently established what we call the Arab Space Cooperation Group in March of last year. This comprises 11 companies, 11 Arab countries from the region who have come on board to learn from our experiences and learn from our mistakes so that we could help enable their space sectors in the respective countries they're in. And we're hoping that the UAE would act as a hub for any company that's trying to operate in the UAE domestically or the wider region by utilizing the UAE as a platform. Oh, and one more thing. So the overall stated vision that the UAE has in terms of having a habitable settlement on Mars by 2117, it's a 100-year plan. It's a very long-term ambition. And we're taking incremental steps in that direction. We had a recent human space flight with our first astronaut that went to the ISS. We have the Mars mission coming up next year where we're sending a probe to Mars called the HOPE probe, and several other initiatives at the Mars Science City in Dubai. And these are all incremental steps that we hope to add more to in the coming years to ensure that we work towards the goal of convening like-minded countries and companies in achieving the ambition. And the thing that attracts us about Mars is the fact that we share a lot of similar challenges in terms of the harsh environment we live in. Energy, food, and water being three of the key issues that we face in our part of the world. And if we could solve some of these problems technologically for Mars, then obviously they'd have some very good ancillary benefits for solving these technical issues on Earth. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Talal. And next, Dan.
Thank you, George, and thank you all for being with us this afternoon as we learn more about the spaceport community and what we're doing. As I started to put together these charts and listening to George about the billions of dollars being spent, there's another report out by the National Space Foundation, like 417 billion spent last year around the world. And we're seeing a lot of communities and regions trying to build spaceports. So I've got some thoughts here on the next slide where we'll kind of give you my impression of things that I think are very practical and helpful as we grow spaceports, particularly at Spaceport America and around the globe going forward. What's helped us is having some unique attributes that can support the space industry, and then having some key partnerships with a good business case before you invest a lot of infrastructure as you grow your spaceport and your community. And along with that, the third bullet is establishing kind of the life cycle support for a spaceport, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's processing facilities, control, whether it's logistics footprint, things like that are critical as you grow your spaceport. The fourth one is obviously kind of a no-brainer, but it deals with building your future workforce, doing initiatives with the local high school, middle schools, university systems, and growing the capability that you're going to need throughout the industry, not just to your spaceport. And then, of course, the fifth bullet up there, which is what we're getting into, collaborate with all the other spaceports and ensure their success as you go forward, but making strong partnerships with them going forward. That's just kind of 5 quick thoughts that came to my mind, and then we've got a few backup charts that embellish some of these things. Spaceport's been up and running since 2006. We've got a great vertical launch area. We've been launching rockets already. But talking about that first bullet, some unique capabilities that you offer your customers, how they come. So we're located right next to a beautiful missile range known as White Sands Missile Range, and we're located up on the outside of that in a beautiful Jornada Basin. It's a beautiful basin about 60 miles long by 40 miles wide with very low population densities. There's only a couple ranchers that live out there. It's a beautiful high altitude, beautiful sunshine weather, and we're at about 4,600 feet in altitude. Gives us a perfect place to do a lot of research, development, and a lot of other activities that are conducive to low population densities. It's not just the sunshine, the terrain, the valley that we're in. The other critical attribute is the airspace. As many of you know, in the countries and the places you come from around the world, having access to space over a piece of terrain is important. So we reside under this 5107 complex that you see. From surface to unlimited, we have access to space 24/7 with our partnership with White Sands Missile Range. That allows us to do a lot of the early development for startup companies that are doing these small sat launch opportunities or new technologies that are being developed. And I'll kind of get into a couple of them on this next chart. This is kind of our current workload that we have. We have a couple of wonderful companies doing suborbital kind of sounding rocket flights, Up Aerospace Exos doing a lot of flight opportunities program for NASA, for Mayo Clinic, for other commercial entities. They're a great suborbital research platform. Of course, many of you know down at the bottom, Virgin Galactic and their future success. Their operations have been moved to Spaceport America. We're getting ready to support them with their platform, dealing in the suborbital world, giving a nice experience, about 4 to 6 minutes in a microgravity environment. That's one of the key focuses as we go forward. Other companies are out there at the spaceport working, but getting to the next point on the grooming the future workforce, I kind of want to talk to the Spaceport America Cup. How many in the audience has heard about the Spaceport America Cup? It is probably one of the most exciting things I've seen in my professional career. I spent 34 years at White Sands Missile Range before I retired to take on this position of running the spaceport 3 years ago. And what that involves, it's an intercollegiate rocket engineering competition. It's basically the future women and men, the young minds that are being very innovative during their college career, and they develop rockets and they come compete. This last year we had 14 different countries from around the world come and compete and launching at different altitudes of 10 and 30,000 feet. There's different categories, student research and design. Some of them are commercial off the shelf, some of them are hybrid, but it's a wonderful competition. We just closed the registration for 2020 and we've got over 200 teams and 20 different countries now coming to the Spaceport America Cup. So it's an exciting opportunity, but the neat thing that does is it allows us to help get associated and help groom the future workforce. The other nice thing is many of these countries that don't have spaceports or places where they can launch have a location where they come and do this. And I want to show you a quick video of this Spaceport America Cup. It starts off at the convention center where all the students come and they collaborate, they get their capabilities judged, and then we open up the launch window at the spaceport for 4 days, and then we have a closing ceremony and we award the very prestigious Spaceport America Cup each year. And it's a wonderful event. Third week in June, please put it on your calendar.
You all have almost a sacred ability now to create things and to engineer things. Most people out there in the world don't have that ability to envision something and to use engineering to put it into a technical framework that will make it succeed based on the requirements that you set it. And so all of you are not just, students or engineers, but you're creators. And the planet needs that in a big way right now.
Big thank you to all of the students that came from around the world that worked hard and just did a super job this last week at Spaceport America. 2019 winner of the Spaceport America Cup, the University of Washington. Come on up.
This is amazing. Some of us have been coming to this competition for 3 years. For me, this has been the biggest thing in my college career. I've been doing this all 4 years. Started out first week, I got to UW, finishing it strong now after graduation. This is my real diploma. But I couldn't have done this without the rest of the team.
So as we grow our spaceports, having a connection with your future workforce, doing things like this at the spaceport makes a lot of sense. It's one of the most fun events we do. Real quickly, where we're going is we're going to focus on a suborbital research capability. We're going to be a microgravity center of excellence in doing different types of not only suborbital, but quickly going orbital with various capabilities, with returnable boosters, with single-stage orbit when they become realistic, spaceplane technologies, and certain small sat launch operators that actually have a staging event that's easy to manage at an inland spaceport, like we've been doing with Department of Defense for many years. The goal is to quickly grow to a spaceport hub that we can support capabilities from around the world. This is what we'll look forward to doing and setting up great partnerships. And it's kind of ironic to have Italy, UAE, and Japan, and Australia here. Those are some of the key places when you look at around a global interface that it's important as Spaceport America reaches out to start developing a network and the partnerships now well before some of the spaceplane technologies are developed, so when they arrive, at least the foundation is in place that'll allow these space lines to quickly transport people around the globe. So I look forward to answering your questions, and George, again, thank you for having us here today.
Thanks, Dan. Okay. If you have found any of this interesting, if you are a community, a nation, a company that is interested in investigating having your own spaceport, I'd strongly encourage you to consider attending the 5th Annual Commercial Spaceport Summit. It'll be next month on November 19th. It's one day prior to the big SpaceCom gathering. It will be held at the George R. Brown Convention Center in Houston. Last year, we had more than 50 people representing 19 different current or prospective spaceports from all around the world, and it was a great discussion on lessons learned, challenges, suggestions. How can we work together to build this spaceport community and the global space economy? So I think we've pretty much used up a lot of our time, but might have just a couple minutes if there's any questions from the audience.
Hi, I'd like to address the question to Curry. Are there any orbital plans for your spaceport? At the moment it's suborbital flights, but has anybody signed up to do orbital flights?
Okay, if you could answer the question. Any customers, I guess, lined up for Australia?
Thanks for asking the question. We certainly do have customers lined up for Australia for launch out of Australia. The one that we've commented on publicly is NASA, which is a fantastic start for our nation and will help us with the regulation process, which hasn't been activated in Australia before. There are a couple of others that we're working on closely with to follow up after that, but certainly open to more.
The NASA one, is that suborbital? Suborbital?
Yes.
Okay, other questions? Okay, well, please help me in thanking our panel today, and you're welcome to catch us in the break if you have further questions.